We could get started. Can we turn it down just a little? Okay. All right. Can everyone hear? Can you hear in the back? More? You just turned it on. All right. How about now? Can everybody hear okay in the back? All right. Thank you. Let me get started. I'd like to introduce myself first. My name is Giovanni Landi. I'm one of the members of Cepta. I will be the MC tonight. Hopefully, we'll have a good event for everybody. Tonight's meeting is going to be on gun rights with the NRA. We have an NRA representative here this evening to give a presentation and then take questions from the audience. First of all, let me start out by saying that there's restrooms in the back corner if anybody needs to take a break. There's restrooms. We have some refreshments over on the side. They'll be available after the event is over if you want to stick around and mingle. There's a sign-in sheet. If you can sign in, give us your email address, and we will keep you up to date on future events that Cepta is going to be having. Also, just so you're aware, we accept donations to help pay for events like this. Some future topics we're going to be having. April 16th, we will be doing East Penn School District Budget Review. That will be with some members from the school board. May 14th, we're going to host a candidates night for local candidates from Lehigh County, East Penn School District, local elections for borough, and most likely also we'll have Lower Macungie and surrounding areas. June 18th, we still don't have a firm event for that date. And July 16th will be our members' picnic and a community day event for July 20th. So everyone is aware, all of our meetings are video recorded and can be seen at www.epcat.us. We ask that no other video recordings be made. If you're interested in a copy, just let us know and we'll help you get a copy. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and being part of the program this evening. If you find our programs interesting, please sign in with your email address and we'll keep you informed. Now, I'd like to start tonight's event with Pledge Allegiance. If you could all please rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I move on to the main program, I'm sorry I forgot one announcement. There's some flyers in the back for a Recycle Your Electronics event coming up. If anyone has any questions about it, you can see Mr. Garrett Rhodes here, and he'll fill you in. It's free, so you don't have to worry about paying the fee to drop off your electronics. We at Cepta are pleased to present Ms. Susan Englowitz. She joins us from the Washington headquarters of the NRA. That's the National Rifle Association. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. Cepta also attempted to provide both sides of this issue, the gun control and the gun rights side. We made several opportunities to get representatives from Ceasefire PA, the Brady campaign, Bloomberg's Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and also we attempted to get the local mayor who is signed on to Mayors Against Illegal Guns petition, and we were declined. Actually, a lot of our requests weren't even answered. So, just so everybody's aware, we did attempt to provide both sides of this issue here tonight, so we could have a good open dialogue. Ms. Englowitz is a manager of political and legislative activities for NRA ILA's Grassroots Division, where she promotes the association's political and legislative agendas through various NRA programs in support of the right to keep and bear arms. In addition, she conducts legislative and election training, oversees campaign field operations nationwide, and represents the association at various events, debates, and panels. Before coming to NRA, she worked as a law clerk for one of the most noted Second Amendment attorneys in the nation, Stephen P. Holbrook, gaining invaluable legal experience working on various firearms cases before the courts, including the United States Supreme Court. Prior to that, as a law student, she worked for Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners, helping citizens promote the safe use and ownership of firearms through legislation and litigation. Susan also has extensive political experience working as staff on various state and federal campaigns across her home state of Michigan. Suzanne attended Michigan State University, earning a bachelor's degree in political theory and constitutional democracy, and has also received a Juris Doctor from Thomas M. Cooley Law School. She is admitted to the state of Illinois and Washington, D.C. bars. Suzanne is an avid hunter and shooter, is a lifetime member of the National Rifle Association, and has been an employee at the NRA since 2005. So now I'd like to invite her up to speak. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity to come and speak to your group and members of your community. I spend a lot of time here in Pennsylvania working on a lot of different legislative issues and political issues, and whenever I'm here, I love the opportunity to actually meet with groups of people instead of lawmakers or doing campaigns, and so I'm very interested to hear your thoughts and your comments tonight. So a couple of things I had hoped to do this evening. First is I wanted to tell you a little bit about the National Rifle Association to begin with. I know we're going to talk about gun rights and the gun control debate and what's going on in Congress, but I think it's really important, because now is probably the most critical time for the Second Amendment more than ever, to have a discussion about who the NRA is. I see a lot of NRA hats here, so I'm sure that many of you are familiar with what we do, who we are, but there's so many conversations being had about who the NRA is and who they think we are and what they think we do, who they think our members are. So I want to tell you a little bit about our organization above and beyond the lobby and the legislative and the legal side, because I think it's really important to know who NRA is entirely as an organization. I also want to talk to you about, obviously, the gun control debate. There's been some pretty big developments today, just a few hours ago, when it comes to what's happening in Congress. So of course I'll talk about what's at stake and what's happening and then take your questions. So if you have questions along the way, I'll certainly address them. I'm pretty laid back, and if something jumps to mind, go ahead and raise your hand and ask as we go, and we'll have a good discussion about whatever comes up as I speak. So I first want to tell you about the National Rifle Association. We were founded in 1871 following the Civil War. Does anybody know the story about how NRA came to be? Has anybody ever heard the story about why NRA was founded? Because a lot of folks think we were founded because of politics, and it really had nothing to do with politics. So nobody knows the story. All right. How do I lower this thing? I'm wondering. I'm really not. I wish I could just talk and like wave my hands at you, because I'm much better than sitting in a. That's probably what I am. What? Can everybody hear me if I talk like this? No. Okay. Dang it. All right. So that's a little bit better. So the NRA was founded in 1871 in the state of New York, initially right after the Civil War. We were founded in New York, which is sometimes ironic for those of you that know the anti-gun sort of, what's happening there in the state of New York right now. But we were founded by two Union Civil War generals and a colonel, and it was because even though the North had won the war, it was realized that the South had far better marksmanship than the North. And while the North had more men and more ammunition, they knew that the South were better marksmen. So they thought it was important that all citizens knew how to have the effective and safe training with firearms. So we actually started as an organization dedicated to the scientific study of marksmanship, and that's what the people needed. Back then, there was no debate over whether the Second Amendment was an individual right or what you could ban and what you couldn't ban. It was about everybody owned firearms, and if you owned firearms, you had to be responsible with them and effective with them. Well, we've evolved quite a bit. Again, as a member organization, we've evolved today. We have 178 different training programs at NRA, and that's growing even more now because, as you can tell by the climate, there's a need for people to be even more responsible with their firearms, safe, responsible gun owners. So we often do what our members need us to do. Nobody asks us to come up with all these training programs and do these types of things. This is what we do, whether you're a member or not. So we have approximately 4.5 million members. Now often when you hear the media talk, they sometimes will say, well, there's 30 to 40 million people that identify with the NRA. And that's true. We can only count the dues paying members, which has been going up exponentially. But right now we're at about a little over 4.5 million. But that 30 to 40 million is important because a lot of times when people talk about the power of the NRA, they're not talking about me or the folks at headquarters. They're talking about our members. You know, a lot of times they talk about us in a negative way, about being very powerful. We're powerful because our members are smart, they're educated on the issue, and they're ridiculously passionate about the issue, which means that they actually get involved. And so that's where our power comes from. So we don't shy away from the most powerful lobby because, quite honestly, what people don't know is we only have 5 federal lobbyists. That's it. There are 5 of them. There aren't armies of lobbyists. In-house, we have, at our headquarters, I think we have 11 state lobbyists. That's it. That's all we have. So our power truly comes from our educated members and the people that are here to sort of ask questions and get involved and learn about the debate. And not everybody here may agree with NRA's policies, and that's fine. I certainly hope there are some people that have some good questions. But more importantly than ever, there's so much misinformation out there about NRA, about what we're doing and how we're fighting this battle right now. We are a single issue organization. We are a nonpartisan organization. That R stands for rifle, nothing else. And a lot of people tend to think they want us to get involved in a lot of different issues. But another reason we've been through the longevity, the legacy of NRA has been because we don't split our base. We are a single issue organization and we're nonpartisan. And that's a really important thing, especially going into what's happening right now in Congress. We work really well on both sides of the aisle, sometimes better on one side than the other, but that's just a fact of the matter when it comes to breaking down votes. And that's what we're going to continue to do to make sure that we can fight off some of the probably most monumental attacks on the Second Amendment. I've been with NRA for over almost 7.5 years. But the folks that I've been talking to who have been there for 25, 30 years have never seen anything like this. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I think it's important that whether or not you agree with NRA or not, it's important to know the facts and understand what the debate's about. Emotions are high and emotions have overtaken some of the facts, but the reality is the facts of the debate haven't changed. Emotions certainly have, and for good reason. However, we have to stay true to actual real solutions to challenges, and that's what we'll talk about tonight. So any questions before about NRA as an organization or what we do or who we are? Anyone been to the NRA headquarters before? No. Well, we have a beautiful there's the National Firearms Museum there, which is spectacular and a beautiful range. If y'all ever, it only took me about 4 hours to get here, so if you ever want to come and visit, let me know. The reason why NRA does what it does is twofold. The first one is the Second Amendment. I'm not going to give you a constitutional law lesson, even though I'm a complete constitutional nerd and can talk about the Second Amendment and the Founding Fathers all night. But this isn't the made-up view of the Second Amendment by the NRA. We know what the Second Amendment means and what it says because what our founders have told us, what the Bill of Rights says, what the Supreme Court of the United States has said. These are not merely suggestions on some parchment paper. This is the Second Amendment that is in the Bill of Rights. And most importantly, I think whenever I talk to folks and think if you don't listen to anything I say about the constitutional side of things, is that rights belong to people and powers belong to government. Anytime you do anything with the Constitution and you see those words, rights, you know they're talking about people. Well, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Anytime you see the term powers, we're talking about the government. So it couldn't be more clear. We could read the Federalist Papers here tonight, and we'd all know what the intent of the founders was when it came to the Second Amendment. But the other reason we do what we do, aside from the Second Amendment being an individual right, is that gun control doesn't work. And we'll say it 1,000 times, is that there is no empirical, statistical, any type of evidence whatsoever that can prove to us that gun control works. And that's really what this comes down to. We have, again, the facts on our side, and I'll talk about some of those tonight, but So the bottom line when it comes to gun control is that no one's going to tell us otherwise that it actually has worked, because no one can point to any examples. Currently today, there are roughly 100 million gun owners in the United States. That's a lot of gun owners. Those folks own approximately, they're estimating around 400 million guns. I was just checking some of the NICS reports about 2011 about how many guns were bought. 10 million guns were bought last year. So you can see that the numbers are going exponentially. The year before that, it was 8 million. So not only are there 100 million gun owners that own roughly 400 million guns, the number of guns is going up exponentially every year, even more. So you've got a lot of armed folks, a lot of law-abiding citizens who own a lot of guns. But the problem is some of the myths that we hear are, well, there are too many guns. We just have too many. And if there's going to be more guns, there's going to be more crime. Has anybody heard that? That if there's more guns, there's just naturally going to be more crime? Well, the reality is that the FBI, now NRA does not do any studies at all. I mean, obviously no one would believe us if we did our own studies and so forth. So we only use FBI crime data. So all of this information is at FBI.gov. They do a fantastic job of breaking down the data on their website. But let me just show you. The FBI releases information usually about a year behind the previous year. So keep in mind, there are more guns in our country today than at any point in our nation's history. And this is what the FBI has to say about violent crime and murder rates. From 1991, when violent crime actually peaked in the U.S., to 2011, the end of 2011, again, these are the most recent comprehensive FBI numbers, the total violent crime has declined more than 49% at a current 41-year low. The murder rate has declined by 52% to a current 48-year low. So in reality, there have been more guns in this country and there have been less crime. Now, correlation does not mean causation. I'm just saying you can't tell me that more guns would equal more crime. Did you have a question?
Yeah, no, actually a statement. Can you explain then the amount of the rise of incarceration during that time period?
I don't know anything about incarceration.
Then you would know where the crime was. If you've increased the amount of people in jail that are the criminals who are causing the crime, then maybe that would be one of the reasons why it had something to do with dropping.
I can tell you this, though, is that enforcement of current gun laws is very
no,
lax.
it's not about
well, what
that.
I'm
It's
saying
about
is
criminals.
prosecutions are down, which they play into that. What I'm saying is the only statement I'm making, again, is not correlation, is causation, is that you cannot say in any circumstance, regardless of any other factors, that more guns is going to equal more crime, because the facts don't tell you that. There are a lot of different things out there that play into that. I know that there are roughly 70,000 people who tried to buy a gun illegally, but only 60 some of them were actually prosecuted. So there could be even less crime because prosecution has been so lax when it comes to gun laws. There are tens of thousands of gun laws on the books, and they're not being prosecuted. The folks that are committing crimes, straw purchases, people that are committing different gun crimes aren't being prosecuted with the guns on the books. So regardless of incarceration, I'm going to say that knowing that prosecution is down, that likely crime rates could be even further lower. And again, there are probably many factors that play into that.
What you were doing was putting a position that because there was more guns, there was
now
less
I
crime.
said correlation is not causation.
No, also,
I'm
she was
just
talking
saying.
about violent crimes and murder rate specifically, she said. And if you look at yes, that's specifically what she said for the FBI data. So that's different than all laws, right? Because you have like California, which has 3 strikes law, so you have more fraudulent check writers now being incarcerated.
Right.
Okay, so you
Drug
got to be
abuse.
real careful about what set of statistics you're talking about and correlate that correctly.
And that's why it's
Okay.
really kind of
And that's why I'm saying
positioning
correlation
upfront
is
here.
not causation. I'm just saying that you can't say that.
Sorry. I just would like to put out a note. I was expecting that we would do a question phase during the end, and
Okay.
if we're going to do questions now, that's fine. I would ask that people, if you have a question and you would like to ask a question, to please come up to the mic. And also, I would prefer if we didn't have any dialogue between audience members. If you would like to direct questions to the front, that would be acceptable, but please let's be polite to each other. Let's not attack each other. Let's make sure we're civil. We can discuss ideas there. So let's keep everything civil, and let's please try to direct our questions to the front and not to each other. Thank you.
So then I will wait and take questions at the end. That way I can get through the information, and then we'll wait till the end then if that's easier. So, but again, more on the correlation and causation thing. What I'm trying to say is that you can't say that. Now, more on that is saying that you do have places that have very, very, very strict gun laws. And I'm going to give you two examples where these should be the crown jewel of safety. One is Washington, D.C. In 1976, they decided that nobody in Washington, D.C. should have the ability to have a handgun. No handguns in Washington, D.C. The rule or the law as far as long guns goes was that if you had a long gun, it had to be registered in your home, which is a rifle or a shotgun, and the law said that the gun had to be unloaded, disassembled, or locked with the ammunition completely separate from the gun. This is in your home. So imagine a self-defense situation, someone breaks into your home, and you have to ask, what are you here for? Because if you're here for this, we'll deal with it. If you're here for this, I need 20 minutes to run upstairs, unlock my case, get out my gun, put it together, open the other case, load it, and then I have a fair fight. But that was the law in Washington, D.C. because they were having pretty high crime rates, and they thought nobody's going to have workable guns in Washington, D.C. So this, if we're going to look at just across the board, should be the safest place in the United States, the crown jewel of safety. Nobody can have a working firearm, basically, in Washington, D.C. Everybody knows that right after 1976, and this went into effect, the murder rates and the violent crime rates went up hundreds of %, literally overnight. But how can that be? Nobody's allowed to have a gun. How can there be violent crime and murder with guns if no one's allowed to have them? So we can see that the trend from 1976 and on, Washington, D.C. was like the murder capital, rivaling places like Camden, New Jersey, and Detroit, Michigan, but always there, 1, 2, or 3, as being a murder capital of the country, and people were using guns for that. Now we have Chicago. Chicago, I spent a lot of time in Chicago. They are on record to have more murders by guns than they did last year. But they have some of the strictest. In fact, that's the only state in the entire country where you cannot get issued a right to carry permit. Only one state in the entire country. You have no chance of even getting a permit for a right to carry. They have very strict regulations on handguns, on being able to use any type of firearms. And again, here we have a perfect, it's DC Part 2, where you have a place where they have made it very, very difficult for people. So how is that? Well, everybody knows is because criminals by definition are lawbreakers. Like I said, there are tens of thousands of laws currently on the books. But if we're not going to enforce them or be smart about enforcing them, they're not going to make a difference. And that's what NRA is trying to say. We're not saying that there is not a problem with violent crime in America. Absolutely there is. But the dialogue has to be on what's going to matter, not a piece of steel that a law-abiding citizen is going to own. A lot of folks are talking about gun registration right now. Well, why not register your guns? Everybody wants to come up with these schemes to register your guns because they somehow think, now I'll tell you, there's a lot of folks I talk to that say, hey, I'm a gun guy, I own firearms, I support the NRA, but why won't they support gun registration? Well, I'll tell you why, it's because it makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't have a chance to have an anti-crime benefit, and if we're going to be serious and talk about solutions that actually work when it comes to violent crime, we have to talk about things that are going to have a chance to work, and gun registration isn't going to have a chance. And this is why. Who's going to register their guns? I own a lot of firearms. I will have to register all of my firearms if that was the law. But who's not going to register their firearms? I guarantee you that some, no, I didn't see anything, I saw nothing. Ignorance is bliss. So what I'm saying is that, the crackhead sitting there with this pile of illegal guns isn't going to say, hey, before I go and rob the next person, the law changed on the 1st of July, so I had better go register these guns. I guarantee you the gangbangers in Chicago are not going to say, well, I can't transfer you this gun, if you don't do a background check and register it first, to a gangbanger in an alley. So, and I hate to mock that, because it's not funny that they would think that wasting all of this time and energy and taxpayer money to go after gun registration of a law-abiding citizen isn't going to do a single thing to stop crime. And that's what we're trying to say, is that We understand something has to be done. Conversations have to be had. We understand that, but they're focusing on the wrong thing. Another reason gun registration wouldn't work, aside from the fact that criminals aren't going to register their guns, is we have this thing called the Constitution. Love it. The Fifth Amendment. Who knows what the Fifth Amendment is? Self-incrimination. So if you are a convicted felon, you have, it's called U.S. versus Haynes is actually the case. There has been a Supreme Court case that says that a criminal, a convicted felon, cannot be compelled to register their guns from either buying a gun or purchasing or possessing a firearm, because it would be they have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. So there you have an entire group of people who are usually repeat offenders, convicted felons who have committed gun crimes, cannot be compelled to register their firearms under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. So somebody tell me how gun registration can work. Now, I'm from Michigan originally, and haven't lived there a while, but I remember Canada being just to the north. And in Canada, we've been watching our neighbors there for quite a few years now, spending billions and billions of dollars creating a gun registry for the entire nation. We watched them do it, and just about 6 months ago, the captain or the head of the Royal Mounted Police actually had to admit and say in a public forum that the gun registry program in the entire country of Canada has not helped solve a single murder in the country. And that's the reality about gun registration. It sounds like a good idea, but in application, it couldn't possibly have an effect. An anti-crime benefit is, again, what we need is an anti-crime benefit, but gun registration isn't going to be the answer. So those are just a few examples of how gun control isn't going to work. When you're trying so hard to focus on an inanimate object of steel, instead of having conversations about people and illegal guns and how criminals are getting guns, criminals get guns through unregulated channels. You can regulate all you want, but a criminal isn't going to get a gun through regulated channels. So they keep coming up with different ways to regulate gun owners, but there's no possible way to regulate the criminals, especially if you're not enforcing the laws against them. So NRA believes very strongly in crime control, not gun control. And those are the conversations that we really want to have. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on. Now, we work on a lot of different things, and there's a lot of conversations going on about gun control and gun rights that encompass quite a few things, including training and being a safe, responsible gun owner. And I just want to mention that the NRA has over 90,000 firearm instructors nationwide. We train upwards of 1 million civilians every single year in that type of thing. We are being part of the dialogue when it comes to school safety, when it comes to being responsible citizens with our firearms. Nobody asked us to do that. We have put ourselves front and center when it comes to providing that training, because that's what we're there to do, and we're the ones that are best suited to do that. This doesn't have anything to do necessarily with the gun control issue itself, but this is an important part of the dialogue that we're having today about school safety, about community safety, about trained professionals that know how to use firearms in certain situations. And so that's going to be a big part of it. And we're going to be part of that conversation separately, because that is different than what's happening in Congress. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the efforts and some of the debate itself. Like I said, you may not agree with what I have to say or anything the NRA does, but you can at least get the terminology right, or you can get the facts right about what you're talking about. In fact, I think that if you know the actual terminology, you'll be a better debater when it comes to it. So, because I was somewhere and there was a protester, and she had a big sign that said "Stop High Velocity Magazines," and I thought, what the heck is a high velocity? I need one of those. I mean, you know, and I mean, again, not to knock, but I'm just saying, if you're going to have an educated debate about this issue, you should probably know what the actual terms are and things that we're talking about, because I'm like, is that when you can throw really fast, or I'm not really sure. So we're going to talk about a couple of the terms. So everybody, who's here has heard about Senate Bill 150? It was the one that Senator Dianne Feinstein, the assault weapon ban. Okay, so I'll start there. In 1994, there was an assault weapon ban in the United States. It lasted for 10 years. So first I want to talk about the reality about what these so-called assault weapons are. Now, the problem we're having, and this issue may go away, it may not go away, legislatively, but the issue is never going to go away when it comes to the media and conversations. This is always going to keep happening. So we need to talk kind of candidly about the terms that they make up. Now, the term assault weapon is a made-up buzz term. There was no such thing as an assault weapon. I mean, assault is a verb, from what I understand, but it sounds pretty scary. And for folks that don't know what that is, heck yeah, who needs one of those? I get asked that all the time. I own AR-15s. I get, why do you need that sort of thing? Not only when people ask me why I need something is it offensive to me, because I certainly don't ask people why they need to go to church every Sunday, but they feel it's okay to ask me why I need to own as many firearms as I do. But the term assault weapon is a big one, and it kind of comes up a lot in the media because people, when they say the term assault weapon to someone who doesn't know anything about firearms, a lot of times they're thinking spray fire machine guns. They're thinking these types of firearms where you pull the trigger and you just can expend all sorts of bullets in every which direction. So the first thing we have to be mindful of when talking about these debates and legislation, again, the legislation has changed, is that knowing that these are semi-automatic firearms, that one pull of the trigger and one cartridge, one bullet flies. And that's a big conversation to have right now. Again, if you agree with us or not, people are talking about these. They're on the TV all the time. The media is talking about them in a way that people think they're scary, and if it's named an assault weapon, we should ban it. Now, normally I could show pictures of what these actually are, but what they're doing is they're demonizing one particular firearm, and that's an AR-15. But what's happening is under these bills and legislation, these would encompass a lot of the traditional hunting rifles that we're talking about. So when we're talking about what these so-called assault weapons are, what they're actually saying is it's a semi-automatic, one pull of the trigger, one cartridge, one bullet flies, with the ability to accept a detachable magazine, and under the most current legislation, just one component, so say a flash suppressor. Or, I don't know much about this area, but if there's been drive-by bayonettings, but if you have a bayonet lug on there, along with the ability to accept a detachable magazine, you could have potentially had a problem owning that firearm like you did back in the 90s. Now, all I'm trying to say is that these firearms don't fire any differently. They don't use any type of different ammunition. In fact, I can't hunt with an AR-15 in Virginia because it's not powerful enough under their law to kill a deer, although their deer are real small there. But I have to use the .30-06, but people don't understand that that is smaller, not as powerful as what my hunting rifle is, but people don't understand that debate. So it's really important that when people just throw out the term assault weapon, I always ask them, you know what, you just mentioned assault weapon. Do you know what that is? Can you define what an assault weapon is? I guarantee that more often than not, the person that just threw out that term, ban assault weapons, couldn't define what one actually is. Now, again, we had an assault weapon ban in 1994 and it lasted for 10 years. Does anybody know what the crime benefit was of the assault weapon ban? There's none. Little to no effect on crime. In fact, the Department of Justice was compelled to do a report right after that ban expired. And they had to research to say, did it have effect on crime? And the DOJ report said it didn't. It didn't because it didn't have a chance to, because those weren't the types of guns being used in violent crime. So even before the ban went into place, it didn't have a chance to be successful because people weren't using those for violent crime and murder rates. In fact, I believe it was less than, I believe it was 1.6% was the amount. So therefore, again, it sounded like a good idea. It was reactionary during the time, but in application, it wasn't going to make us safer. It wasn't going to take criminals off the street. So the ban sunsetted in 2004, and nobody looked back. Nobody looked back to reinstitute it, nothing. It just went away. But here we are again, in a moment of just what do we do, what do we do? Let's propose an assault weapon ban. Now, the ban was introduced just today. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid decided, I was waiting for groans, but wait. Senator Harry Reid decided that he was dropping the bill altogether. But I do want you to be cautious because, again, the bill itself was dropped. Now, Senator Dianne Feinstein will undoubtedly add that as an amendment back in. Again, there's no support for it. We knew there wasn't going to be support really in the House, but we couldn't take anything for granted in the Senate. And we certainly weren't going to say, yeah, we'll see what happens. So we did a heck of a job lobbying the Senate and having our members contact her. In fact, I had guys working every gun show here in Pennsylvania, sending postcards to the senators here and doing everything that we could to get people raised awareness of it. But just because that happened doesn't mean it's over. Because again, while that will be introduced again, maybe as an amendment and voted on, it probably won't be successful. People are going to continue to talk about and demonize what they believe are assault weapons. So we need to constantly have a conversation with them about the reality of the term of what we're talking about. Now, the other part of that assault weapon ban was a ban on anything more than 10 rounds. That is still up for grabs. So let's be very clear that that's going to be introduced as a separate, probably. So let's talk a little bit about that. Again, the high velocity magazines. So these are what they're terming our high capacity magazines, but I want to be very clear. They are not high capacity magazines. They are standard capacity magazines. But you see what they did there? They started using the term high capacity because what happens to a person, again, who doesn't know much about firearms, which is fine, but when they hear high capacity, they think more powerful, more deadly, more dangerous. These are standard capacity. Now, I was doing some research because I like to look at old guns and so forth. In 1935, the Browning High Power came with 13, a magazine for 13. So do you have one of those?
My favorite gun.
Is it? Okay. But that came from the factory in 1935 with a capacity for 13 rounds. Anything from 10 to 30 is standard from the manufacturer, but what they've done is they've said now anything over 10 is considered high capacity, therefore dangerous. Again, they're focusing on one item. They're not talking about the person, the criminal, the deranged psychotic people that clearly have mental health issues that are getting a hold of these. Instead, they're talking about the actual magazine itself. Now, the question comes up, well, why do you need this? Why do you need that? Quite frankly, why should the government dictate to you how many you need? Exactly. They don't know what type of self-defense situation you're going to be in. Now, I know in New York, in January, they passed a law that you can't have any more than 7 rounds. Completely arbitrary number, unless nobody has 7-round magazines unless you have an old 1911. But who has a 7-round? Anybody here have a 7-round magazine? So out of all of you, maybe 4 people. I don't. All mine are 10 to 30. So, but what I'm saying is that they picked an arbitrary number and decided you are only going to have 7. I don't know why. Just 7 sounds good. Legislation proposed in Connecticut was 1. Vice President Biden said you only need 2. Right? You should go outside and fire 2 off in the air, and then you're unarmed. Great. So what I'm saying is that the people giving us advice on self-defense situations are not the people we should be taking advice from. The reality is that if you're a law-abiding citizen, it shouldn't matter how many you have, because, and we could go through all types of scenarios. If you're in your home and you have more than 2 intruders come in, your dexterity during a self-defense situation is not great. You're going to need more than that many shots, but we can have those conversations, but the bottom line is that they're focusing on the wrong thing. Instead of focusing on the people that are using these incorrectly, illegally, in terrible situations, they're instead of focusing on something that they're going to try and regulate even further that, again, is not going to have an anti-crime benefit. So that one is going to come up. Now, the assault weapon ban that was proposed was pretty outrageous. I mean, it was outrageous compared to the last one. I mean, she had named 19 banned guns by name in 1994. She named 157 in this one. But I almost were starting to think that they did that on purpose, is that they introduced this crazy, over-the-top ban so that people would be outraged and they'd be so focused on this assault weapon ban that anything they did further would be a compromise. Sounded like a good idea, so we have to be wary of that. So this is where the magazine bans come into play, and this is where, who has heard universal background checks? Who's heard this term? So, okay, so we've talked about the, quote, assault weapons, the, quote, high capacity, which are standard capacity, and now we're going to talk about the, quote, universal background checks. They're not universal. Again, I mean, that is the bottom line. Anytime you purchase a gun from a licensed dealer, you have to go through a background check. NRA was the one who actually created that system to make up for the Brady bill, so that you would have to, anytime you bought a firearm, you had to fill out a form and get an instant background check from the FBI. We support that system. We have lobbied Congress to make sure that system is correct, that people that shouldn't be able to have firearms can't get firearms. But these universal background checks, the problem is one, they're not universal. Again, the two gangbangers in an alley in Chicago are not going to say, hey, we need to find an FFL before I give you my illegal gun, because we have to have a background check.
What's an FFL?
Oh, I'm sorry, a federally licensed dealer. So again, anytime you purchase a gun from a licensed dealer, you have to go through a background check. What these laws would say is that, again, anytime you transfer a gun to somebody, which you do, if I transfer a firearm to somebody in a different state, I have to do it through an FFL. Two illegal or criminals aren't going to say, before I give you this illegal gun, we have to get a background check done on each other. That's not going to happen. So how that could actually help, we can't figure out. Now let me tell you this though, again, anytime you purchase a gun from an FFL, a licensed dealer, you have to go through a background check. Now there are many laws in place already. It is a 10-year felony, federal felony, if you transfer a gun to somebody that you know or should know is prohibited from having that gun. It is a 10-year federal felony for an FFL to not do a background check on somebody they're selling a gun to. I mean, there are so many laws currently in place that it's already a federal felony to transfer guns illegally to people that you should not have them. But what the universal background checks would do is they would also be part of rentals and loans. If I wanted to loan my firearm to my brother to go to the range, I would have to get a background check done. That's called universal. So anytime you use one of your family members to use a firearm, then you would have. So this is what universal actually means. It is getting rid of all private types of transfers. Again, how there's an anti-crime benefit in that, we can't figure that out. But this is what they're going to start saying, is that they use the terms universal because, well, yeah, universal. So we have to be very careful about the terms we hear on TV, the terms that people are throwing around, and what the effects of these gun laws would possibly be. Now, again, the assault weapon ban was dropped today. Again, we'll have an opportunity to be added on as an amendment. Again, no support really for it, but the other parts of it are very much up for grabs, and they're going to be discussing and debating these over the next couple of weeks. So it's really important that people start sort of having conversations about the realities of some of the things that they're discussing. Now, our bottom line is we believe, again, in crime control, not gun control. We believe that there needs to be a lot of different conversations about mental health, and that's where the conversation has to start. Anytime a deranged madman gets a hold of a firearm, it always seems that afterwards there were 500 red flags that everybody knew about, but nothing was done. Now, we're not mental health professionals, we're the NRA. And we're not going to say that we know what needs to be done there, but we know that that has to be part of the dialogue. The school safety, I do want to just briefly talk about that. We'll have some more on that, but basically, again, we are best situated to train people for these types of circumstances. Now, we're not saying that everybody should have armed teachers and everybody should have guns in schools. Absolutely not. What we're working on is called the School Shield Program, where schools can actually do a self-assessment of their school about how safe they are or what type of capacity they have to deal with this type of situation. We are best suited to train people, paid professional staff that would be hired by a school if needed. All we're saying is that we will provide the training to do that. We're not saying that everybody should do this, or that. We're just saying that if a school or a community decides that that's what they want to do, we would provide the training facility and very specialized training for those in that community. So that's our part of that discussion. But again, we aren't mental health professionals, but we know where the dialogue needs to start when it comes to real solutions for the current problems. And again, we are not going to say there aren't challenges ahead, because there certainly are, but we need to have very direct and truthful discussions on them. I understand it's very emotional and people like to kind of find things to sort of be angry about, but if we're really going to do something and really make a difference, we have to really get away from controlling a piece of steel and talking about ways that are actually going to work. So that's what we're working on. It's going to be a busy time in the next couple of weeks, not only in federal, in Congress, but state legislatures. I'm sure we all sort of watching each of these states introduce here, and even Pennsylvania, it's being introduced, not to say it's going to get legs, but in some places, it's got legs and it's passed where we've never seen anything like it. So we have to be really alert as to proposals and things that our lawmakers are talking about and hold them accountable. We have to hold our lawmakers accountable and let them know that we're paying attention. We know what they're introducing, what they're talking about, and make our voices heard. So that's what we're encouraging our folks to do. And with that, I will take any questions that anybody has. Oh, come on.
I
Okay.
Did Colorado pass theirs, and what's the status of California? I understand that's a big, whatever happens in California kind of spreads across the country. So what's going on there?
Well, as far as California goes, California used to be the one, California. I mean, people wouldn't even ship firearms there. Unfortunately, other states like New York, Connecticut, and Colorado are now becoming, and even Maryland, are becoming 10 times worse than California. Colorado has made progress. There are still some things going on with that legislation. It hasn't been signed, but unfortunately, it's not looking good. It's not looking good in Maryland. It's not looking good in Connecticut. So there are quite a few states, for example, in New York, they passed it, and it happened so quickly. Overnight, midnight, I remember I was in Las Vegas at SHOT Show, and they put a bill in at 11 o'clock at night, passed it through committee with closed doors, voted on it again at 6 a.m., and the governor signed it by like 2 o'clock that afternoon. And basically it said, you can't have more than 7 rounds, and you have 1 year to sell anything you have out of state. And they forgot to put a law enforcement exception in there. So, I mean, again, these folks are going really, really quickly with these legislations. They're also using some very sketchy procedural issues. But I will say this, is that we have got some of the best folks on the ground in states that this is happening. And we are not only going to work through legislative means, but litigation as well. What they did in New York was not only, we believe, unconstitutional, but procedurally not correct. So we can challenge them on that. But we're ready. Anytime that this happens in the states and it gets passed, and we can't do anything until it's passed and signed. So we can't litigate or do anything legally based on what if. But we're waiting to see what happens. So.
It seems to me that the news media always seems to be in favor of gun legislation. This is where they give up, or for giving up the Second Amendment. How long will it be before they lose the First Amendment? That's one. Two, why do they support this kind of legislation?
We have never had an easy go with the media, and I don't suspect that we will. I will say this, I can't tell you why we have such a hard time, because to us it's very common sense. But we don't anticipate it to change, and we're going to do the best that we can. I will say this for our executive guys, even though we know when we're invited onto a media show that it's pretty much a setup, our guys are going and they're talking, because it's, even though we know what's going to happen on the show, our folks are going to talk to everybody and anybody, because education is key. So we're going to keep doing that.
Hi, I just had a question about House Bill 357 in Pennsylvania, state nullification of federal firearm laws. What's the NRA position on that?
The nullification laws are pretty interesting. If anyone's not familiar, they're a constitutional theory that a state does not have to enforce a federal law that they think is unconstitutional. Quite a few states have introduced these types of legislation. I can tell you we don't have a position on them officially, because they're not, at this point, they haven't passed a federal law yet that they would be able to use these against. So we don't have an opinion on what could happen. It's a very interesting constitutional theory that goes up against the supremacy clause of the Constitution. So again, we don't have an official position on the nullification laws. People are doing it, but I'll tell you that if a federal law is passed and the states decide that we're not going to enforce it, we agree that the laws we believe will be unconstitutional. So that would be an interesting legal challenge, but we would have to fight it from a federal point, because we don't have standing because we're a national organization. But it's a very interesting thing to see this many states. Now this has been a pretty popular theory with Obamacare and medical marijuana, and now on this issue about states saying that we believe this is a federal law that's unconstitutional, we're not going to enforce it. But until a federal law is passed and until the state refuses to enforce it, we can't say how that legal battle is going to go.
Just one more quickly. What is the NRA position on the constitutional militia as written by Edwin Vieira and so forth?
The constitutional, as far as just the, I'm sorry.
Going back to the constitutional militia instead
Just
of
the
the
term
large
militia,
standing
or-
army that we have currently.
Well, it's been pretty clear in all of the Supreme Court cases, all the way back to Miller, all the way up to Heller, actually, that the militia term back then, I mean, every single word in the Second Amendment was defined. Arms, the right, people, I mean, every single term was defined, including militia. The term militia actually meant a well-organized, able-bodied men. That's what that term meant. It didn't mean army. A lot of people mistake that for being a state-regulated standing army. The reality is that we didn't have standing state armies until really the National Guard, which wasn't until, I believe, either 1908 or 1911. So our position is that the Supreme Court and the founders have made it very clear that the term militia just meant well-organized, well-disciplined, able-bodied men that were able to take up their own arms in defense. Luckily, that debate doesn't really come up anymore because the overwhelming evidence, not only through history, but also in the most recent Supreme Court cases. We used to use the Miller case from '34, but now we've got Heller and McDonald from 2007 and 2010 that say the exact same thing. So luckily, the issue about the Second Amendment being individual right that belongs to the people is, thankfully, people aren't bringing that up anymore because they understand that the Second Amendment is an individual right that belongs to the people, and most recent Supreme Courts have said so. Yes.
Hello. It's funny you bring up Miller. That's what I wanted to ask you about. I don't know how many people have a background on that, but I was reading about the Miller case today, and I found it interesting that the shotgun that was used was deemed to be not considered something that would be used as a military weapon, and they said that it's kind of like the exact opposite of what the assault weapons ban is trying to say. It's like, well, why would you need, that kind of hardware in a civilian hands? Where that case, to me at least, set as precedent that it has to be parity military style equipment that you're talking about that cannot be restricted.
Well, it's interesting because the Miller case would be usurped mostly by the most recent cases, which they've sort of replaced that with common use instead of military style. Now, a lot of times people refer to an AR-15 as military style. Anybody here served in the military? Were you given an AR-15? No. So what we're saying is there's a lot of confusion about what a military style firearm is. It's not an AR-15. They were given M16s and so forth. But as far as that goes, the Heller decision is more focused now on common use, not military style. Now, the common use thing is an interesting legal concept just because for non-legal folks, how do you make something uncommon? You ban it. So if something has been banned for a long time, it's no longer common. And then they can say, well, you can't have it because it's not in common use. So those are going to be terms that are going to be the forefront of a lot of upcoming legal challenges. Now, Heller and McDonald didn't solve all the problems. They left a lot of doors wide open, and there's going to be further litigation about incorporating handguns in common use, which would be anything under the National Firearms Act of '34. So there's going to be a lot of upcoming cases that will cover more of that from Miller. But Miller, which included militia in it, but now has been usurped by Heller and McDonald. So.
Thanks.
Yes.
I understand the United Nations wants to get involved with the fight.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because I meant to include that. The United Nations this week is reconvening. Now, a lot of times when I talk about, just to be clear, when I talk about a United Nations small arms trade treaty, has anybody heard about the UN trade treaty as far as arms? The United Nations is debating. Now, a lot of people think, oh, well, they're talking about tanks and they're talking about military. They're not. They're talking about civilian gun ownership. They're talking about just general firearms. The NRA has been what's called an NGO. We are a non-governmental organization for the last 20 years. And it's actually really fantastic that we have that status because it's very difficult to get. Fortunately, we're included in the debate. So Wayne LaPierre has actually, our executive vice president has testified in front of the UN. And for the last 20 years, they've been trying to find a way that would limit importation, exportation of firearms and essentially limit the use of certain types that didn't have what they're calling maybe a sporting purpose or that sort of thing into the United States. it would significantly affect gun ownership, the ability to own certain guns in the United States. Now, they've come up with drafts. We don't know exactly what a treaty would look like, so we can't say exactly what it would do, but in the last couple meetings, that's exactly what it would have done, is it would have had a significant effect on the United States and our gun ownership. Now, the rest of the folks in the UN don't have the attachment or understanding of a Bill of Rights or our Constitution, but luckily, because they refused to take out that civilian portion, it completely went dead in the water. And that was a couple months ago. And now they're reconvening this week to try to draft it again. They've been trying to do this for about 13 years now. They get closer and closer every time. In the past, we have had folks like John Bolton, who is a fantastic ambassador for us in the UN. We haven't had that type of support, but luckily we are very involved, watching very closely. But yes, the UN is meeting this week, and they're going to start to draft another treaty. Now, luckily, in sort of anticipation, we have lobbied our Senate. Again, it has to be ratified by 2/3 of the Senate, and we have quite a few senators on both sides of the aisle that have said and actually signed a letter to the president that they would not ratify a treaty that would affect our Second Amendment rights. But again, a lot's changed, a lot's happened in the months, it's been about 4 or 5 months since they last had a draft. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and I'm sure you'll hear more about it on the news because they're going to start bringing it up when they start meeting at the UN in New York. Yes.
What are the ramifications of me giving a long gun, I won't call it a handgun, to my children or my grandchildren?
When it comes to inheritance, right now, the federal law allows you to do that, to pass it along to your family members. Now, how that could change with pending legislation, I don't know. There have been drafts and suggestions, again, these are drafts and suggestions, that you would no longer be able to transfer in that manner whatsoever. But again, the current law allows you to do that. But again, those are the types of things that could be affected when it comes to the universal background check, being able to transfer something to your grandson or transfer something to a family member. They would be ruled then by universal background checks, and you'd have to have a federal, you basically would have to put the federal government front and center in anything that you did, even among your family members. So that's why we're gonna fight that. But again, that legislation hasn't been drafted. We're waiting for it any day now. Yes.
Yeah, I consider it poetic justice that Maryland is considering passing these restrictive laws. Now Beretta is making noises to move out of the state, costing them the jobs. Remington Arms is talking about moving out of New York as a result of its restrictions, and that will cost New York at least 1,000 jobs. And people like Cheaper Than Dirt and some of the suppliers have notified New York that they won't supply them based on the restrictive laws. So that's poetic justice.
Yeah, that's...
And another quick point that I want to mention, under Dianne Feinstein's original bill back in 1994 of assault weapons, a British round mess that was used during the Revolutionary War, a flintlock weapon, was considered an assault weapon under that law.
Right. It is pretty shocking that a lot of these laws being proposed are going to have economic impacts. Like you mentioned, Beretta in Maryland said if you pass this, we'll leave Magpul Industries. Anybody know Magpul? That's a significant organization in Colorado. They have said, and they have a huge sort of online social networking behind them. They have said that we're going to leave Colorado, and these other states like Texas and the Carolinas are rolling out the red carpet and say, we'll bring you here. So a lot of the Northeast folks, Connecticut, Stag Arms, the other day they had a rally, and this is Connecticut where, they don't have much hope at all, but Stag Arms shut down their entire manufacturing facility, and every single employee went to the Capitol and said, this is about this, it's about our jobs, it's about a lot of different things, because a lot of these folks, they've even said, even in New York, you've had places, when I was out talking to some folks from Midway USA and from Glock, they said, we're not going to make 7-round magazines for one state. We're just not going to do it. And so that will have an effect as well. If they go down to certain states where say you can only have 4 rounds, they're not going to manufacture for those people in that state because the cost would be incredible to do so. So it will have a pretty significant impact on the firearms industry as these states continue to do that. Yes. Oh, you can go ahead. Yeah, and then we'll come over here.
Before you make a judgment on me, I'm a past FFL owner, carrying permit, every legislation, every permit you could have in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, from pistols to everything. My father, I grew up in a house with over 90 guns. We have 4 children in the military, actually 3. My son was killed in Afghanistan. So what my question to you is, and you would probably be able to speak better on it. First, do you wear your seatbelt?
I do, yes. Sometimes. I'm not going to lie and say I do all the time.
But you do that why?
I try to.
Why do you do that?
Just out of my own personal safety.
Right. So, but sometimes you don't. And other people don't, right? But, so they break laws. So no law stops anything. It's the consequences of a law that stops people from doing things. I mean, you don't wear your seatbelt.
Well, really, it's because I don't want to be going 90 miles an hour and roll over, which is why I put safeties on my guns if someone else is around. And those are personal choices, so yes.
But
yes.
Laws don't stop crime. They don't actually stop the crime because you keep associating law-abiding citizens versus criminals.
Right,
Criminals are not going to obey the law. They don't obey any law. But so we should have no law then, since, right? I mean,
right.
So
well,
under that concept.
I understand. So what's your question? Because I know where you're going with this.
Well, no, maybe you don't.
Okay.
Well, all I'm saying is you were saying earlier that those, and I'm saying no, that's not a logical argument. The second part of that is no country, that has tremendous, gun regulations seems to be able to keep their gun crimes under in control. As you were saying before, this gun legislation doesn't work except in Israel.
Right.
It works very well, right?
Yes. Well, that's a perfect example. So let's first start with the international side. Again, and I can't say this, I don't know how many more times I can say this, but correlation is not causation. All I'm saying is that Israel, very strict gun laws, very low violent crime. There are places like, Switzerland, very little gun control whatsoever. In fact, at 18, you're assigned a semi-automatic firearm. So very little gun control, very low crime. So I can give you tons of examples. Japan, very strict gun control, very low crime. So again, I'm saying that correlation is not causation. Now, you can't compare the United States to other countries, and a lot of people like to do that. My sister is a police officer in London. She doesn't have a gun. Drives me nuts. But what I'm saying is that people like to often say, well, we don't have this problem in other countries. Well, the reality is, one, they don't consider our population. They don't consider the fact that we have a constitution that is very different and defines us differently. But the reality is that we make up the largest portion of civilian gun ownership in the world. So yes, our numbers are going to be higher. But what I'm saying is that you're right about Israel. Absolutely correct. There are countries that have very strict gun control, but then you have places like Brazil, very strict gun control, and the murder rates are off the charts when it comes to that. So these folks eclipse our murder rates by rates, not numbers, rates. So when you're talking about statistics and you talk about rates and you talk about numbers, yes, our numbers are going to be higher. Our country is significantly way larger than most of these countries, and we have more people in them that are armed. But what I'm saying, though, is that in a fair conversation is that correlation is not causation. All I'm saying is that I don't know what works in other countries. I just know that in the United States, when you look at the number of people that own guns, and you look at the number and the rates of crime falling, all I'm saying is that you can't say, but you're right about that, but you can't compare those. Now, the other argument you were making about laws don't stop people. They don't physically stop people. We have a lot of laws on the books, and we hope people are going to follow them, but that doesn't mean that we can judge people ahead of time. I hope that nobody here leaves, goes, I think over here you have a little bar, gets completely drunk and leaves and runs over and kills a family of 4 because you were drunk driving, and we're going to start regulating Budweiser. I hope that nobody leaves here and goes...
We do regulate Budweiser.
Well, we regulate a lot of things, but you can go next door and get by showing your ID. You could go to Bed Bath & Beyond down the street and buy as many knives as you'd like. You can do that tonight, and I hope, because there's a law against killing people, there's a law against stabbing people, there's a law against shooting people, there's laws in place that you hope people aren't going to, but we can't in this society start regulating things because we hope people aren't going to use knives to stab people and that sort of thing. And
Well,
so,
we hope people won't drive fast either, but we do
Right,
that. We
we
do
do.
create laws. We are a society of laws.
absolutely we are.
And the next part of the question would be to you, would be, the gentleman here wants to donate, he wants to give his son or his grandson his rifle. Well, in the original purchase, let's say, he went and had a background check to get the gun. Now he's going to give it to someone who, the rest of the people in the area, we don't know if his grandson is mental case or has any problem or has it, but he can give that, he can transfer that gun there. My father owned wolves and mountain lions. We had 4 mountain lions and 27 wolves. We had to have regulations because they were dangerous to our neighbors. They didn't care about us. We had to have special fences. We had to have all this stuff. We had to have checks. They had to come every year and check. The same as in Israel, they check every 3 years that the guns you own are yours. The manufacturers have to have the serial number. It's traced directly to you. It becomes responsible to you. If you lose your gun, it is your responsibility. It's about responsibility.
But in Israel, is it a privilege or a right to own a gun?
Well, there you have it. Right?
There you have it. I understand where you're coming from, and I do.
Well, in this country, they made an amendment that allowed people not to have slaves either. They changed laws that were privileges and not.
If you want to have a constitutional convention, then we have said, go ahead and do it. But what I'm saying is that the reality is when you, yeah, I appreciate the very well thought out arguments. I certainly do, and you know,
So
I get it,
explain to me why it's okay and it's safe for everyone for someone who doesn't have a security check or to that if I have to go get one, to get one.
Listen, we think people there needs to be, again, some sort of thing in place for there needs to be a heightened awareness for mental health. There needs to be checks. The background checks, perfect.
And periodically.
We're on the same page in this regard because anytime somebody is adjudicated mentally incompetent at a state level, that information should go into a federal system so you can't buy a gun. Let me tell you.
What happens if you already own one?
But that again, you can't just say, well, what if that guy goes crazy? What if this person decides I'm going to go?
But I can stop you from buying it, but then can I take it back away?
But how would you?
Regulate everything.
I was about to say Skynet will be here any minute. So, and nobody's a Terminator fan, but so anyway. But no, what I'm saying is that I understand, but we are not going to support the what if regulations, especially as something that is a right. And it's never.
But it's not a right for me to have. No, it's not a right if I go to. Excuse me. It's not a right if I go to the gun dealer and they check my background check and say no, I don't pass the mental
Again,
thing. It's not a right for me to buy a gun, right?
Again, there needs to be no. If you've been adjudicated mentally incompetent, but that's the question: is that needs to be changed? That needs to be improved. We are not mental health professionals.
Okay.
We don't, but we agree that there needs to be a significant course of action when it comes to mental health and people having access to firearms. 100%. But we would agree, but we're not those folks. We're trying to direct that conversation.
Well, I don't want to stifle conversation. I would ask that we try to keep our comments to within a few minutes so that everyone has a chance to speak. Thank you.
Yes, universal background checks, and we talk about mental health, but the problem is with the current federal HIPAA laws, that universal background check, we will never find out the individuals who are actually mentally ill because under the HIPAA laws, they can't be reported.
And that's part of the conversation that needs to be had. The only thing the NRA can do, the only thing that we can do is that we can lobby, because we have a lot to do with this NICS system itself. We can lobby Congress for the funds, the appropriations to make sure the states have the money to, because right now only 20 states are reporting mental health information into the federal system. To us, that's unacceptable. So we believe there has to be a better way. Now, our involvement when it comes to mental health, again, we aren't mental health professionals, this isn't our wheelhouse, nor will we make it ours, but we will do everything we can to lobby for appropriate funding so that the NIC system, we believe the NIC system, the National Instant Check System, needs to be improved, not expanded. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of conversations that need to be had, and we'll be there to help lobby Congress for the appropriations to do so, but we're in no position to talk about the complexities of mental health law and adjudication. So,
One other comment, and I'll get away. Historically, those nations that required registration of its citizens to register their guns, not long after that came confiscation. And throughout history, there's a whole laundry list of nations that after they've done that, they've killed a lot of their own citizens. Thank you.
I do want to just say one thing in regards to that is not only in other nations, but confiscation has happened here in New York, California, and immediately after Hurricane Katrina, where they've gone door to door and taken thousands confiscated from law-abiding folks and destroyed them. So I know that we often look to history, but when we say that the next step after registration is confiscation, it's not because we're paranoid that the King of England is coming back for his guns. It's because it's happened here in the United States as well. Yes, sir.
You don't want to give them a list.
Yes, over a period of time, I had a NRA PAC fundraiser call me for contributions to the PAC. I've had a congressman for about 20 years that, for the most part, he voted for everything I could think of that would be an attack on my constitutional liberties. But he did support gun rights. On at least 2 occasions, we tried to have a candidate defeat him who not only supported gun rights, but supported constitutional liberties. In both cases, the NRA contributed to the incumbent. I recognize you're a single-purpose organization, but by doing that, you're contributing to a person who's giving me more reason why I need a gun. And I just want to know, how do you screen when you decide who gets money and who doesn't?
That's a great question. We're not only are we nonpartisan and single issue, but we have an incumbent-friendly policy, and essentially what that means is we dance with the guy that brought us. Over the years, again, I understand, and it's a very heightened climate of a lot of different political issues that people are pretty, fired up about. And sometimes there are conflicts across the board when it comes to a pro-gun guy. Okay, for example, let's talk about Harry Reid. Now again, we did not endorse Harry Reid. I always get this. We did not endorse Harry Reid, but the reality is that this is how we do our endorsements. There are 3 things we consider in endorsing a candidate. Well, 4 essentially. 1, are they an incumbent? Because again, if they're an incumbent who we had endorsed previously, who is running again, and they haven't had a significant anti-gun vote or something change, we will always continue to endorse the incumbent until we have a reason not to. The 3 considerations we make in endorsing a candidate is, number 1, a voting record. A voting record is fact. You can't take away from it. Everyone can see it. You can see the bills that are NRA bills and then how they voted on them. Not the bills that people think should be gun related, but gun bills that the NRA either helped draft, worked with co-sponsors and sponsors on, or worked on. The second consideration is a questionnaire that we send every single person who files to run for office. They receive that in the mail, and they get those back to us. And the third is public comments, town hall meetings, any type of things that they've said about the issue. And that's how we actually come up with a grade. I certainly understand that there are going to be some races that are going to frustrate folks because, in some situations, the other guy might be fantastic because he filled out a great questionnaire, but if we have an incumbent who over the years has a voting record that we can stand on, we will continue to support the incumbent.
Can't hear you. All right, Homeland Security is buying up all this ammunition, okay? Am I paying for that? Because if I am, I don't want them to have my money paid for. And 2, I'm aware of 12 police officers from the state of New York that come down to this town to buy ammunition for themselves to go and do their duty in New York.
As far as the federal agencies and ammunition, I can assure you that we did a significant amount of research into this. As you can imagine, the numbers seem shocking when you see the numbers. I will tell you this, that we did a very full investigation and worked with a lot of folks, and just to be clear, what we found is it is a completely reasonable number based on, you have to remember, the amount of agencies that have grown is enormous. The amount of armed folks that do training. We actually broke down the math, and on our website, I don't think I brought it, but on our website, we actually did the math based on how many federal agents in every agency are there, how much training do they do per session, how many rounds or types of training, and we actually broke it down to find out. And I understand that especially when there's ammunition that's disappearing and there's shortages and price gouging, but they do it also for a 5-year period. So it's not just for 1 year, it's actually a 5-year period for all agencies, for all officers, including all their training. So we did do a lot, and we are rest assured that it's nothing, has anything to do with gouging or ammunition.
Why is it all the hollow points, the most expensive bullets, instead of the full metal jacket that you use for training?
Well, I believe that it's a mix of it, though, and that's the thing, is it's a mix of different types of ammunition, and that's the study. And on our website, actually, is nraila.org. We actually did a piece on this specifically, because we were getting I can't find any .223 ammo to save my life, and I think something weird is up. But I know that looking at the numbers and so forth, we feel confident that there's nothing sinister going on with the large amounts of ammo. So.
Then why did they fire those .700 tank mobiles into the
Yeah, I don't know.
You know, these are the things that people want to know.
Right.
And nobody's talking about this.
Right, and we could only do our due diligence as far as reaching out to the agencies and looking at the numbers, but as far as the other agency stuff, they'd have to probably give a better clarification on that, so, yes.
I heard that the agricultural department has a lot of cows that are potentially criminals. So.
Could be, could be.
But anyway, I had a concern. Let me go to my comment first. The Sandy Hook shooter. Apparently, the news reports that I've read said that his mother was very much into weapons, and she had quite a few of them. And she taught him how to shoot. And he was very experienced with weapons and with the military use of weapons. And when they did the crime scene investigation after that shooting, they found that the high capacity magazines that he was using were not empty. He was changing those magazines whenever he had an opportunity to do so. And that's the military use of high capacity magazines. You don't want to be caught with a half empty magazine when you need a full magazine. So this business, that goes against this the high capacity magazines with respect to that. You know, if you're going to be using it in a context like that, and those are the shootings at Columbine there and the others, they were shooting in that context of having to do it very quickly, knowing that their time would be limited, and they're not going to be they don't want to be found or engaged in gunfire with having not a full magazine. So you change it when you have the opportunity to do so, so that it's full. That's the one thing about high-capacity magazines. I was thinking, I was sitting here, that even darts in the wrong situation are probably assault weapons.
Well, actually, the FBI just released, I don't know if you saw, but they released what types of things are used in murders. And it was actually clubs and feet, or hands and feet. Were you going to bring this up? Hands and feet were significantly hammers, bats, and clubs, all much more than actual rifles and so forth. But yeah, and again, those are facts that people don't usually, but the FBI actually put that out just recently, and it's on their website as well, that hands and feet and beatings, clubs and hammers are far more responsible than any type of rifle.
And the other thing deals with background checks. My concern with background checks is whether or not there are agencies out there who are developing databases of that information and keeping it when they're not supposed to keep it. A few years ago in Pennsylvania, that issue came up with the Pennsylvania State Police, that they were maintaining a database with that background check information. So I'd like you to comment on that and perhaps tell us what the NRA thinks about that.
Well, again, this is a very, I want to say a slippery slope, because there are so many highly sensitive components to the background checks and what is deemed as mentally incompetent. One of the comments during the the hearings on this assault weapons bill came from Dianne Feinstein, who believed that veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan who had PTSD should not have or own these types of firearms. So the reality is that how are they going to define that is going to have to be carefully crafted. The background information currently is when we say if you're adjudicated mentally incompetent, that means that there's a court record of it. Just because you went and saw your doctor because you have anxiety and you're on like Zoloft or something, that doesn't mean that you're mentally incompetent. But the problem is that the conversations they were having would encompass a much greater area. So again, the record keeping, the HIPAA laws, the backgrounds, and who's going to keep that information will be a very difficult thing to navigate, I'm sure. States do it now, again, that have been adjudicated mentally incompetent, meaning that it's gone before a court. So that standard will have to be set. But again, like I said, we aren't going to be part of that conversation. We know something has to change, but I couldn't tell you. But now we don't like any type of record keeping or anything like that. But the reality is when you're adjudicated in a court of law, there's going to be paperwork on that. And that information would be at the state level and be submitted to a federal level into the NICS system.
That's not right.
Oh.
I wasn't just talking about people who have been adjudicated incapacitated. I was talking about just people who are having background checks done on them.
Right.
I think the issue came up in Pennsylvania that all of that information was being maintained by the state police.
I see.
Instead of destroying it once a person cleared the background.
Okay, gotcha. I'm sorry. I misunderstood your question. Now, when it comes to record keeping, I will say this. We are fierce when it comes to privacy because, as you've seen, some newspapers are publishing information about right to carry permit holders. We have actually looked at legislative efforts to make sure, and just as we would now, we haven't had a case similar to the background check information because we only deal with the NICS system, which is a federal. Now, when you call the NICS system, the 800 number through the FBI, the law is they are required to destroy that information within 24 hours. Now, the store of which the FFL is required to keep that information for 20 years. The BATFE can compel those records in an investigation. Now, we have put through legislation and we've battled to make sure that they can't get that information. I would suppose that if a law is changed about any type of record keeping and there's a privacy component to it, we would be involved with something like that, just like we've been involved with court cases and legislation in regards to privacy of folks who have right to carry permits. So once it's deemed how that information is going to be kept, I'm not familiar with the Pennsylvania case specifically, but I would assume that if something changes in regards to record keeping on gun owners at a state level, that's something that we would have to go into each state and look at legislative options and be ready for litigation if it was misused.
Hi, well, thank you for coming tonight and speaking to our little town here.
Sure, thank you.
I was sitting at a Tea Party meeting earlier this month, and imagine my surprise when I see we have a firearms advocacy committee. Imagine my surprise when they're informing us of the various Lehigh Valley mayors that have signed on to Mayor Bloomberg's Mayors Against Illegal Arms Coalition. And I find out that our very own mayor here, Mayor Winnie Obst, is a member of that coalition. So I gave it some thought, and last week I decided that I was going to run for mayor. Because it's important to send the message. It's important to send the message to the mayor, just remind him, he is a gun owner, so I was surprised that he signed on to this, that the Second Amendment does not exist to protect the right to hunt. It exists to protect the civilians and allow them the power to, if necessary, overthrow government if and when it becomes tyrannical. And when the government allows itself to use drones against American citizens on American soil, I start to get a little nervous. I spoke to the mayor about this issue, and he said that he was, and I quote, tricked into allowing this group to use his name. And I said, all right, well, you know, I understand that. You're a gun owner. I was surprised. Remove your name from that group, and when I see that that's happened, I will remove myself from the race and wish you another happy 4 years. Go back to annoying the teachers union on the school board. So I was hoping you'd be able to talk a little bit more about the Mayors Against Illegal Guns, because who could be against illegal guns? But before I hand that to you, I clicked Drudge today. You probably saw this actually, and of course he had the Dianne Feinstein foiled or something like that as the headline. And I read the article, and it contained the erroneous information that a lot of news agencies reported that an AR-15 was used in the Sandy Hook school shooting. It wasn't. It was there. It wasn't used. He was using handguns, from what I remember hearing correctly reported. The media is out there to demonize these weapons, even though they're not being used by criminals. In fact, more crimes are committed with handguns and fists than anything else. So it's important that we get the facts right. I want to thank the NRA and your group for straightening the record on these issues, and just keep it up.
Well, thank you, and good luck if he doesn't remove his name. The Mayors Against Illegal Guns is really anything but. They actually listed 4 different things that they're going to focus on, and not a single one of them had anything to do with the removal of illegal guns. One of them is to shut down gun shows entirely. So there's a lot of things that they use that moniker, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, again, where nothing that they have done so far would do anything to get illegal guns off the street. In fact, you said tricked, and I know you said it sort of in jest, but there have been 70. Yeah, there actually have been 79 mayors who have resigned from mayors because they were actually tricked, because they thought it was about getting illegal guns off the street, and when they realized it was just a scheme, some of them have written some pretty nasty letters to Bloomberg saying, "Take me off, you tricked me into joining your group, you're doing nothing to get rid of illegal guns." Because if they were truly trying to get rid of illegal guns, that's something we could get behind. But when you try to do things like push gun registration, that's not going to do a single thing about illegal guns. It's going to create a larger black market, essentially what it's going to do. So the Mayors Against Illegal Guns is really just, it's Mayor Bloomberg. He thinks he's the mayor of the United States. In fact, he has come down to Virginia. I mean, the man has come to Virginia and made his own sting operations at Virginia gun shows, and he's had to been told by the federal government that we'll hold you in contempt. You can't just think you have jurisdiction, but he has. He comes down and tries to do things to intimidate gun owners and folks at gun shows. But again, the reality is it's unfortunate, because if there was a coalition that was going to do something substantial to get rid of illegal guns, that would be one thing. But unfortunately, his group has not done any of that. So, sure, we'll take one last question. Anybody? All right. Oh, what's that? Yes, sir.
Kind of a follow-up about the story about newspapers publishing names of gun owners. I believe a television show you might be familiar with, Cam and Company. He had a segment on kind of the opposite of that. There was a gentleman did a little inside, I guess, expose, approached a bunch of news reporters who were responsible for publishing the names, and asked them if they would put a sign on their property, "This is a gun-free house." Well, as is true of the typical hypocrisy of liberals, I know that's redundant, none of them took him up on having a sign on their property saying, "This is a gun-free house."
Right, yeah, it's a very dangerous proposition for a lot of reasons, that they have put the names, phone numbers, addresses of people who own firearms, and this included federal officers, judges. It included women who had restraining orders from abusive spouses that had gotten away from them, and now all of a sudden he knows where to find her. So very, very dangerous proposition. There was a woman, an editor, who did it in New York, and so what they did is they found her name and her phone number and her home address, and they put it on the internet, and she was terrified. And so it really, but again, she still stood by what she did, but again, that's something that we take very seriously, and we will fight any chance we get when that happens in those states. So well, thank you all very much for your attention.
I would like to thank our speaker this evening and the NRA for sending a representative